A bespoke Big Five itinerary seamlessly blends culture, history, food, origins, people, and nature.
Welcome back to Paper, Ink, and Passports Travel. Today, I am with my friend Ashish. He is the president of Big Five, and he's passionate about adventure travel and sustainability. Ashish, thank you so much for coming on and talking with me about Big Five and what you can offer my clients.
Sarah, it's so good being here. Thanks again.
I'm so excited to talk with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Big Five, how you got into the travel industry?
It's the company itself's been around for 47, going on 48 years now. My parents actually started the company in 1973 in Kenya. I was born in Kenya. My father was born in Kenya. My mother was actually born in Sudan. My wife's families came from Uganda. So we've been entrenched there. In terms of it, I started my career actually in finance, and I just wasn't having any fun. So I spent a month in India. I went with my father, spent a month through India, and I ended up seeing this tiger, just getting up close to tigers, studying them for a little bit. And I met this videographer for BBC who had taken this B-roll footage of a tiger taking out a crocodile about a year before I had been there. And I was so enamored by it that I went from wanting to design automobiles and working in finance to just falling in love with this business. And that was 18 years ago now that we did this. And it was just, it's been so much fun ever since, just because of the fact that every single day we're just pushing the envelope, right? How do we make people uncomfortable to get to places where you get to ask more questions, where you don't feel like you're copying somebody else's ideas, you're actually forging your own. And that's really where I fell in love with this business.
Yeah. But you are pushing the envelope and you're making people uncomfortable, but they're not going without the luxuries of, five-star travel, right?
That's exactly right. It's funny. We have an internal tagline that says, "We are the company for people who are comfortable being uncomfortable." And the first question we get is, "Does that mean I'm camping?" No, 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 no. You're still in the lab of luxury. However, you're willing to get your hands a little bit dirty because you're willing to kind of go into places that nobody else has been to. So, for example, if you're going into Colombia, for example, it means going up to Caño Cristales, which is where the waters turn bright colors because the algae is red and yellow and fluorescent color, and the water turns those colors. Or you're going into San Agustin, which is the largest necropolis in the world. So you're getting beyond the Bogota, Cartagena coffee region that everybody else just seems to focus on, and just know that Colombia has about 80% more that nobody else ever sees. So that's an example.
And Colombia is really close to your heart. Tell me a little bit more about some of the things we can do in Colombia.
It is. One of the things that I always talk about Colombia is it's in mi corazón. It's in my blood. And the main reason for that is, as a family business, when I first got here, a lot of our destinations were already set up. Of course, Africa and Asia and parts of Latin America. Colombia happened on my watch. It happened. We were the first country to go into Colombia. It was in 2006, I want to say, and I can't tell you how many offices and how many events I got laughed out of talking about Colombia, and just because we were so far ahead of the curve, and now, of course, it's such a popular destination. And it would happen on my watch, and I found there, and what I noticed when I first went there was it wasn't the case of going there and saying, oh, well, this place is not touristy. Whatever you could say that could go wrong, went wrong on my first visit. But I fell in love with the country primarily because of the fact that it wasn't the case of them not wanting to help American travelers. It was a case of them not knowing how to. And that kind of innocence you really can't find in too many places. So getting to know them, getting to talk to them, getting to help work with them, to teach hotel managers, to teach guides, to teach. I mean, I fell in love with it so much that I ended up opening my own office in Bogota and Cartagena. And it was because of the fact that there's just a pure genuinity to it. It's a sleeping giant. Now you fast forward to today, and of course you've got everything that predates Inca in parts of Colombia, right? So you've got these Colombian empires that bridge the Mayans and the Incas, that bridge the Mayans and the Chachas, and every other empire that goes with it as well in Latin. The second part of it is that you've got so much more. The gastronomy scene in Colombia, you get an eclectic scene of European cuisine, of course, Latin American cuisine, Colombian cuisine, a mix of American cuisine, and it's all blended together. this concept of street art, you start hearing about street art in different places. That whole movement started in Bogota. So, Bogota actually went and basically sanctioned all their street artists to beautify the city. I'll never forget the first thing I saw. This was probably 2016, and it was so special when I got there. Pearl Jam was coming to Bogota to perform, and there was a huge street art all across the walls in La Candelaria, the old city, just basically saying, "Welcome to Bogota, Pearl Jam," and everything was done in street art everywhere else. And now you look around, and street art has become a very common mode of communication in all of South America.
Mm-hmm.
So that part was there too, in terms of course, the coffee and whatnot. What I fell in love with Colombia was just the number of authentic empires in terms of what I mean by the indigenous cultures, from the Tairona tribes to the Palenque women to everything else that goes with it, that just get blended together. And you ask people, are you from this section? Are you from here? Are you from there? What you'll hear back is not, I'm from Tairona, or I'm from Santa Marta, or you'll hear, I'm from Colombia. Yo soy colombiano. That's what you hear every time, which I love.
That's really, really, really cool. So sustainability and culture are also very close to your heart. And I know, having worked with you for, say, Morocco,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the itineraries that I know Big Five puts together are this great blend. I mean, obviously what the clients want, everything is bespoke, but, you can really take a country and a culture as a whole and expand on the client interests, whether that be adventure or sustainability, gastronomy, ancient history. But I think adventure is up there, especially in a place like Morocco. I think the itinerary that my clients had was spending some time out in the desert. And I know that there's some beautiful, like 5-star desert camps, right?
Yes, they are. Yeah, yeah. There's so many places in Morocco, and I'm very fortunate growing up in this business that I got to travel a lot of the world just like you did, and I got to see things that nobody else has been to. So when you get to Morocco, I love going to deserts where the carpet salesmen haven't all shown up there lining up as you enter, trying to sell you everything, right? So you're touring by ATV. The desert that actually your clients are going to, I was actually there last year. My latest visit was, I think, my visit number 18 to Morocco.
Oh, wow.
And that particular desert, it was closer to Marrakesh. It was a rock desert. And I actually toured the desert in a high-powered dune buggy. And it was running actually on biofuel, the dune buggy was. It
Oh,
was really cool. So I got to explore parts of it, the desert and whatnot, and of course on ATVs. Just so much more than here. Let's go ride a camel. So much more than that. The novelty of riding a camel wears off in about 10 minutes because you get on about 10 minutes, you say, okay, I've had enough. I need to get off this thing. No way to get around. So
yeah.
it's there's not that many camps there, and it's so open. And the sunsets and the astronomy at night are second to none. It is just amazing what you'll see up there.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I would love to go to Morocco someday.
I'm ready. Let's go. I'm ready. Come on.
When's
You
that
you and
plane
I you and
starting?
I think the yeah, well, you and I think the exact same way. So let's do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just getting off the beaten path, and I'm a big history buff, and I definitely don't know a lot about some of the early African
Mhm.
civilizations and early Latin American and things like that. My focus has always been the Greeks and the Romans and the Celts and the Northern Europe, cold polar region sort of places. But obviously, being in this industry, you start to learn a lot more about everything else, and it's so fascinating. I find the way that um, the all of the ancient, like, we think we're really connected now, but I think
Yeah.
we don't realize how connected the ancient civilizations were with each other. And you touched on that with Colombia being a bridge between the Mayans and the Incans. And um, I think that's fascinating. I think Big Five does a great job of connecting us as travelers in modern time with cultures and things we might not have otherwise expected.
Absolutely. You know, the idea behind travel is not just to see things, but to challenge also what you think to be true.
Hmm.
A prime example actually is Morocco, as a matter of fact. So, you know, you hear about the Berber culture in Morocco. What a lot of people don't know is if you go out to the very western part of Egypt, you know, the Siwa Oasis, there's actually 30,000 Berber in that part of Egypt. And it's the only place that they are. And it's the bridge between Morocco and Egypt to show you the Berbers went there. Another one, this one still blows my mind, is actually in the Field Museum in Chicago. And
Hmm.
I urge anybody who's going to the Field Museum to go into the mummies room because it proves a theory that we actually were thinking about for some time. So, you know, I love Peru because it goes well with Colombia, but the northern part of Peru around Chachapoyas and Cuelap and these places, these are areas of Peru that predate Machu Picchu by 1,000 years. So the way they mummify in that part of northern Peru with those empires and the way they predate, they actually use catacombs. And they're so similar in how they mummified to how the Romans did when they were in Egypt in terms of what you would see in Alexandria or some other parts, that the Field Museum has floated a theory that I actually personally agree with. I don't know how it's logistically possible, but I agree with that. The Romans didn't necessarily learn how to mummify from the Egyptians, but they learned from the Peruvians. And actually, if you time date it, the Peruvians came first. They actually were in power before the Romans. And if you go to the Field Museum and you see the mummies side by side from the Chacha Empire and from the Roman Empire, they are so eerily similar that when we saw this theory, and my family and I had just gotten back from Peru. We've of course been through Egypt many times. We have our own office there as well, and we just looked at it and said, "Huh, that makes sense." So of course, like you, I'm a history buff as well. Went back and nights I can't sleep, I just start reading
Hmm.
and just binge reading. And when I get out and go, you know what, I think they're right. So I'm probably on this call right now telling you that I actually agree with the Field Museum and think that the Romans did learn how to mummify from the Peruvians and not from the Egyptians.
That's fascinating. Wow. I'm reading
Yeah,
a
it's
I'm
sorry.
reading a book about the history of the Silk Road, and it's definitely a lot of reading as opposed to fun pictures of the Middle East and all. But they have a lot of maps in there
Mhm.
about how ideas and cultures spread, and it is focused on that the Silk Road area, but you look at it and you look at how trade and how people moved from, say, like Mongolia through Uzbekistan into northern Africa, and then how people in Africa moved south and then north into Europe and across into South America and the US, well, America, the New World. And it is so cool. But we might have gotten slightly off topic.
You sure did.
That's okay. This is what this is all about. It's just
That's right.
chatting. But I wanted to touch on something that you brought up a little while ago. You've mentioned having offices in Egypt and Colombia, and I know you have offices in other places. So
Mhm.
when my clients are traveling with Big Five, we're working with someone that's based in the US to put an itinerary together. But when they go to, say, Morocco or Colombia, they are with Big Five drivers and guides the whole time.
Big Five staff. I'll tell you in certain places. So, for example, in Kenya, in Tanzania, it's our own people, our own drivers, our own guides, our own vehicles there. In Colombia, I think we have 2 guides on staff there. Other places, it is freelance guides. However, it's guides that we know personally and that I know personally.
Okay.
So, whenever somebody travels with us, the one thing that's really, really key, and this is something that makes us really unique, is that every guide that you're traveling with reports to me. So what I mean by that is if your clients and our mutual guests are traveling through, let's say, Egypt, and this just happened. I just got this note yesterday. That traveling through Egypt, understanding that there's a sandstorm coming up near Abu Simbel, knowing how to route them to go through here. It's us speaking to the guide right at that moment, saying the sandstorm's coming here. There's no broken telephone, right? So, and you're never getting something where we're saying, well, we heard this happen, but we're not sure how it happened. No, I mean, literally the way we believe is if somebody sneezes, we want to know about it. We want to be able to answer questions that haven't been asked yet. And we want to be able to know what somebody wants before they want it.
Mhm.
A prime example, actually, I'll never forget this. We had and it was actually in Colombia. We had a guest that had gone through Colombia, went to the Gold Museum, and on the third floor of the Gold Museum, and this shows you how many times I've been there. The third floor of the Gold Museum, if you turn left and then you turn your second left, there's actually on the second shelf, there is a little piece of the Gold Museum that depicts a jaguar and how they hunt. And jaguars jump on your back and they bite here. They don't go here like a typical predator.
Okay.
And it's depicted in that museum, and that dates back to before any major Latin American culture in Peru or anywhere else. Well, what's unique about it is we had some guests that were there that were so blown away by that, and also by just how much sheer gold, because it was just a lot of a nugget, and how much it was done, that we went and found every piece of gold chocolate we could find and dumped it into their room. So when they came back to the room, there was a stack of gold chocolate sitting in the room, and it was just, even they didn't ask for it, but it was a little note from the travel advisor just saying, you know, so glad you visit Colombia. We noticed you love gold. This is for the plane ride home.
That's awesome.
Those little touches, I think, go a long way, and nobody has to say anything. It's just us being observant, you being observant, and just saying, you know what, this is a dream. This is not it's not a vacation. We're well past that. This is a lifestyle. This is a dream. This is something that somebody's worked really hard to try to accomplish, you know, over a period of time. And we want to be able to make magic happen while they're there.
Yeah. Yeah. Making magic happen. I mean, it's what we do in the industry, right? In our field, we anticipate and we execute.
You know, here's the irony of this is when I was working in finance, my manager in finance, I was an institutional trader. He told me, he said, we are the custodians for dreams. I didn't know what he meant. And I didn't know what he meant while I was in finance. I learned what he meant while I was in travel. And it's amazing because, again, you know, I firmly believe that people you meet them for a reason. So this man was my mentor for several years. I learned so much from him. And when he said that, I kind of said, that doesn't really apply to finance. I mean, obviously, from a monetary point, it does. But then when you come here and get into travel, all of a sudden, it applies in ways we never thought imaginable, where a vacation is no longer a vacation. For example, for some of our guests, the vacation is actually an apology to their spouse because they traveled so much for work before the vacation that the actual getaway is an apology to the family and spouse. And so it becomes really just so unique and crazy, compacted into a week and a half. But we make magic happen during that time because we are custodians for dreams.
Yeah. And are you, you're familiar with the Wanderlist program?
I am. As a matter of fact, we're actually involved with it as well.
Yeah. I think that's a conversation for another time.
It is 100%. It's by itself.
But, you know, right now, as we're dreaming of traveling and not being able to actually get on a plane and go somewhere, you know, continuing to stay inspired and dream is key to, well, really staying sane, I think. But Wanderlist is a great way to do that. And I think we should definitely chat about Wanderlist at another time.
Oh, 100% right, because it actually blends to the background in finance and planning. So I'm looking forward to that call. That'll be great.
Yeah. Well, and it ties in a lot to what Big Five does with some of your travel DNA stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly, and you said it best. It really is. Travel is a DNA, right? It's either, you know, the idea of being adventurous and being, you know, into this kind of exotic adventure, it's either in your blood or it's not, right? Mm-hmm. So, and really what our job, if we have one single job, is to make sure that your travelers are taking their trip and not their neighbors.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll never forget, 15 years ago, we had some guests that wanted to go gorilla trekking, and, you know, and the advisor called us and we put it all together. You know, Wanderlust or something like that didn't exist at that point, obviously. And so we're working on it. And little did we know that they were taking their neighbor's trip. So about halfway through, they said, no, we can't do it anymore. We have to turn back. We can't do it. It's too strenuous for us. And we went through all the checks, all the physical checks, everything we possibly could, interviewing the guests, everything we could. Mm-hmm. Nothing would have prepared us for the fact that they actually had a phobia of leaves and jungles. It wasn't the gorillas, and it wasn't the actual trekking. It was a phobia of foliage. If I could even say that, that would have never come up anywhere. So it was 15 years ago that the idea came up that we need to be able to help guests come up with their trip and not follow their neighbor's trip. And that's what this is all about. So that's why I say it's either in your blood to really forge and be a leader in the adventure travel industry and be a trendsetter, or it's not. And it's okay if it's not. That's all right too. The key is to be honest with yourself. And
Yeah.
that's really all we want to do.
Well, and as I do want to wrap this up, but as we work together, whether that's me working with Big Five or you working with another advisor or with any other DMC that I work with, is knowing my clients and knowing what makes them tick, and whether that's adventure travel or whether and adventure, obviously, guerrilla trekking, I would put that more at the upper end of adventure. It's more of a hard adventure than a soft adventure. But soft adventure can be, just going into a small Colombian village and getting to know the locals. I mean, that's still adventure travel. So, but knowing what your threshold is, and one of the questions I like to ask clients is, if we start talking about food, because everyone wants to say they're a foodie, and to an extent, I think a lot of people are really curious about local foods. But one of the questions I like to ask is, what's the strangest thing you've ever eaten? Because that lets me know, well, can we push the envelope with like a really crazy food tour? Can we, do you like to cook? Can we be cooking interesting things? Can we?
Do you like eating mint flavored ants in the Amazon?
I had clients in Southeast Asia a couple of years ago, and they're a wonderful family. They have 3 small children. The youngest boy is the only one that would eat the bugs. Oh, I loved it. I loved hearing about that. Yeah, but so you have that when you're looking at a family, then you have a wide range of different things. And the other thing then is, of course,
I like that question a lot. In terms of what's the craziest food you've eaten. For us, when we're doing something in Colombia, it's a very similar question. It's okay, why are you going? And we'll just stop and wait for an answer that makes sense. Why are you going? And we'll keep asking the same question until we hear it. And then we'll ask, what's the craziest thing you've done ever in any place?
yeah.
And when we hear that, that's when it starts telling us, just like, as you said, can we push the envelope? Can we not? And there's different levels of adventure. And that's just it. Adventure doesn't mean jumping off a cliff with your hair on fire. Adventure could mean forging into places nobody's been.
Mm-hmm.
For us, it really is defined as being able to find a place on a map that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Getting you to a place that you make your own.
Yeah. And I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. This has been so fun.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks again. I look forward to the next one.